Welcome back to another episode of Waterproof Records. I'm excited that you're here, and I enjoy hearing feedback from you in my socials about what you're liking about each episode, so make sure you reach out. Let me know. Obviously, I'm covering albums just kind of as I go. I get inspiration. I see something and I say, hey, I'm going to cover that album. But I do have a guest scheduled that should be on the next episode, and I have a few more that I've been talking to. So if you've been looking forward to me having somebody on the show again to talk to, because I know these episodes where it's just me talking to you and we're reminiscing about an album might be something that you like about the show. But I'm sure there's plenty of you that are like, hey, I'd love to hear other people's input and feedback. But anyway, this is one of the ones where I'm just going to talk about an album. And I think it is an incredible album. I think it's an iconic album. It is something that even back then, when you were listening to a lot of alternative music or grunge or punk or, you know, whatever your scene was, there might have been an element of like, oh, it's uncool to like this. But I'm telling you right now, this album, start to finish, song after song after song, is just bangers. They were so many hits off this album, and it really did define a time and set the stage for so many other amazing female artists in rock and in music. And of course, there were plenty that came before her as well. But it's worthy to sit down and talk about this album in particular, which I still think is amazing. So let's get into it right away. It's time to talk about Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette. Let's go.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jagged Little Pill.
Okay. So before we get into whether I'm supposed to say Alanis or Alanis, let's talk about DistroKid, my sponsor, the reason the show keeps going and why I'm growing, and I have you here with me. So if you didn't know, I have a special link at DistroKid, which is distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. That gets you not 50%. I was so quick to say a number. I wish it was that much, but it's still pretty doggone good. It's 30% off, not 50% off. 30% off your first year of uploading your music on their service. And when you use DistroKid and you get this 30% off, basically you upload your songs and they go to Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, pretty much any streaming platform that you want. And again, they have so many enhancements that you can do. A lot of them are built into the app and into the software when you upload your music, but then you have so many more things that you can do. It's an easy way to check if you're making any royalties and payments. You can split them amongst other musicians, but it just makes it super easy to get your music out there. So definitely check out distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof and get that 30% off, not 50% off. Jacob, geez, what are you, crazy? The DistroKid people are going to come and whack me on the head. All right, but let's talk about Jagged Little Pill, Alanis, whichever it is. So you have to understand, if you're new to the show, I'm a human being and I make mistakes and I don't get things right all the time, or I mispronounce things. But something worth noting is I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a lot of words and pronunciations that we have, I would have said Alanis growing up in high school. When I heard about her, I think everybody in my social circle would have said Alanis. That was just like the way I pronounce it. It wouldn't be until years later, maybe living on the West Coast or being in college and hearing somebody say Alanis. So if you're a diehard fan or you're a Canadian name pronunciation specialist, then call now. Call me right now and tell me. Well, I guess you're not going to call. But I'm going to do my best to just say Alanis Morissette, because I feel like Alanis is probably, it sounds like that's probably the correct pronunciation, but I don't want to hem and haw too much about that. But anyway, look what I have here with me. For those of you listening, I'm about to hold up a vinyl copy of Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. This is a Barnes & Noble exclusive, the landmark generation-defining album on transparent red vinyl. Features the hit singles You Oughta Know, Hand in My Pocket, Ironic, You Learn. Cut from the original analog master. This is wonderful. Here, let's pull out the record. Sorry, listener. Sorry, I won't take too much time doing this because I know if you're not watching the show. But there it is. Transparent red vinyl. I think that was a good decision. Absolutely a good decision. So I got this copy recently. I feel very fortunate because records are coming to me more and more easy these days. I have a friend who works for Rhino, which is, a part of the Warner Music Group. And so I got a chance to go to their offices, and they have access to these promotional copies of vinyl, to help market and whatnot. And so this friend of mine, she said, you're welcome to come and dig through and take as much as you like. And I got a chance to go. I haven't even posted the video that I have of me in this space yet, but this was one of the ones I grabbed. I didn't go too crazy. There was a lot of really great stuff, and if I could have, I would have walked out of there with like 15 crates of vinyl. But I wanted to be respectful, and so I walked out, I think, with about 20 albums. I was trying to be, cautious about how much I walked out of. And she made it very clear. She was like, you can take as much as you want, but again, I'd love to visit again. And maybe get some more vinyl. But I got this copy, and I just opened it, so I haven't even had a chance to play and hear how that original analog master sounds. But I'm sure it sounds amazing, because that's the one really great transference of when you're getting stuff on vinyl, when you're getting records. If it was on analog, that's gonna be the best way you're gonna hear it. A lot of stuff that's recorded digitally, while it's fun to have the vinyl, I don't know how much that really translates over to get those warm sounds. But when you're getting stuff that's from those analog days, in this form, it's usually pretty cool and really enhances it. But I'm not against buying something that's a digitally recorded album on vinyl. I just think vinyl's fun. I'm never gonna be like, I'm definitely not an audio purist. I'm not one of those people. I just like music. You know what I mean? And I love the ritual of having records, because it's, when you're crazy about music, it's fun to have a ceremonious process of playing something. I enjoy the process of putting it on a turntable. It's a pain in the ass to flip a record over, but it feels very ceremonial, very ritualistic. And when you love something, it's fun to have something to collect and do that with. But anyway, you're listening to the show. You're not looking at the show, the majority of you. I have a very small audience that watches the YouTube. Not a lot. I mean, my clips go okay on my socials, but the majority of my audience, you listen when you're on the go, and that makes sense. That's what a podcast is for. It's meant to be something that you plop in your ear? That doesn't sound good. That sounds pretty gross. Pop in your ear. Plop in your ear. Geez, Jacob. Pop in your ear, your AirPods or whatever, and you're doing other things and you're listening to the show, or you're driving and you're listening to the show. So I know a lot of you don't watch it. I only make the video version because, hey, that's what they tell you you're supposed to do. And it gives me videos for TikTok. And Instagram. Fuck TikTok. Jeez, I'm not even really putting that much energy into that app anymore. It's been a nightmare over there for me since they muted like 50% of my videos. So if you only follow me on TikTok, please know that I'm also on Instagram. If you go over to Instagram, all the stuff with the sound is still there. It's still there. So if you were sad that you couldn't see the Mayonnaise video or the Rage Against the Machine video, or some of those classics of mine on TikTok, if you go over to Instagram, none of them are muted, and I'm just at Jacob Givens over there. So just a word to you to let you know. But let's talk about Alanis Morissette and this album, Jagged Little Pill. And I said this at the top of the show before the theme song. I want to clarify. I'm not saying that there was any shame in listening to Alanis in the 90s, if whoever you were. I'm just saying that if you were trying to be cool, at least amongst the guys, there was a little bit of whatever about getting into somebody like Alanis Morissette, at least in my friend circle. It's not all of them, but you wouldn't go around and be like, I'm really into this. But I'm going to tell you right now, I loved this album. I thought it was fantastic. I owned it. I thought many of those hooks and songs were captivating and catchy. I loved her voice. I remember seeing the You Oughta Know video for the first time and just really loving the chorus. And there was a sense of controversy behind it. I know Alanis got painted as like the angry girl movement, but I didn't get that from that album at all. I really didn't. I mean, you get the fire and the powerful stance of like, you ought to know. You get that sense. You got the power from it. But I think that if you just weren't used to a powerful woman or a woman who spoke her mind, then maybe you'd be like, oh, she's so angry. I grew up with a mother who was a, educator, a teacher, a college teacher who would go on to become a college professor. And my mom was she spoke her mind. She was an author. And so I grew up in a house with a woman who was a strong-minded and a strong-willed woman. And so I wasn't surprised by any of that. And I didn't look at it as angry. But many people did. She definitely got painted in that corner. So many artists in that time, female artists, were like, they're just angry girl rock. And I'm like, I think you're just saying that because it's a female. You know what I mean? Because if you had all the men at the same time singing the same subject matter, nobody would be like, they're so angry. Be like, no, they're just singing about that one in particular. That's one subject in particular, a relationship that fell apart, or how pissed they were about this or that. It was just so wild that everybody felt the need to like make it into this angry thing. But I remember seeing the video for You Ought to Know out in the desert. It's in those what do you call those? The salt lands, where the water dries up, those desert-y areas. And I've been out there and seen those locations because I'm pretty sure that's filmed pretty close to California. But she's out there. She's carrying a suitcase across this, desert land. It's got that real burnt film, kind of orangish, yellowish look to it. You've got the fisheye lens, and she's wearing white. And one of the cool things about the video is Taylor Hawkins is playing the drums. Taylor Hawkins, R.I.P., famously the former drummer of the Foo Fighters, who passed away a little while ago. But you can see him. This is pre-Foo Fighters time. He's in that video. And he's also in the You Learn video. I remember seeing him in that when they're doing the pie fight at the end. It's good to see his smiling little face in that video. Sad that he's gone too soon. But so you can see him in that video. And one thing that if you didn't know, in You Ought to Know, the bass is being played by Red Hot Chili Peppers' Flea, and the guitar is being played by Dave Navarro, who was in Chili Peppers, but also at the time, also from Jane's Addiction. They're in the studio version. They're not in the video. You don't see them in the video or anything. And there was somebody who was helping produce Jagged Little Pill who was really close. I'm forgetting his name, but he was really good friends with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And so he was the one who said, hey, I want you guys to come in here and play on this. And Dave Navarro and Flea really only got like not much to go off of and just kind of had to jam and rock out to add to it. I think they really heard the compelling, powerful vocal of Alanis on that song, which is amazing. And Flea's reaction was like whatever he heard in the bass that had been laid down was basic and kind of lame, weak shit, I think he says. So they just really wanted to rock and, bring it up a lot. So clearly it helped the energy of the song. And that is the first single that goes out to the world. And we all hear You Ought to Know. And we see this new female artist. And this album comes out in 1995. And she's 20 at the time. I'll tell you what, I don't think I remembered that we were that close in age. I mean, maybe I had an awareness of it when I was 16 years old when this came out, that Alanis Morissette was only 4 years older than me. But my perception of it now is looking up at the screen and thinking of her as much older than me. Not because she looked it, but there's that weird phenomenon, right? When we see people who are older than us on television and we immediately think of them as so much older. I'll give you a perfect example of this. If you watched The Wonder Years with Fred Savage, his older brother Wayne, who was like a kid too, but because I was watching Fred Savage and I was like close to Fred Savage's age, I looked at older brother Wayne and I always thought of him as like older. I always saw him as older, no matter what, no matter if I caught up to his age or what. I just saw him as an older kid forever. And I think that happens a lot whenever you see somebody on TV in a movie or whatever. And even if the age difference between you isn't very far apart, but you just suddenly age them further. So when I was reminded that Alanis Morissette was born in 1974 and that she is 4 years older than me. I was kind of baffled. I was like, can't believe I was in high school and here she was just rocking. I mean, just blowing down the walls with these songs. Just unbelievably good songwriting. And I know a lot of us think of this album as her debut. It's her third. But this is the funny thing. So she has an album that comes out in 1991. It's like a pop album. I think it's just called Alanis. And this is released only in Canada. So this is like pop kind of songs. And it goes platinum in Canada. I don't know what that means. That's what I found in the research. It went platinum in Canada. So I would think that whatever their numbers or requirements are, it got to a really successful place in Canada. So then she releases her second album and it sells half as many. It doesn't do as well. And the label at that time just is like, oh, well, and then they drop her. And I remember reading somewhere that she said the label pretty much was like, yeah, your career's over. And she was 17. You know what I mean? Like before that, they were calling her the Tiffany of Canada or something like that. This reminds me of like Robin Sparkles from How I Met Your Mother. She was like the Tiffany of Canada. So maybe that's where they were inspired by that. I don't know if you watched How I Met Your Mother, but one of the characters had she was like the Debbie Gibson, Tiffany type character from Canada. So that's what they thought of as Alanis. So she has these two albums and then she's dropped from the label and then she gets introduced to this guy, Glenn Ballard. And they just hit it off and he's, worked as a songwriter and producer and worked in the music industry for quite some time. And he really connects with her, sees the talent and skill that she has. And they co-write a lot of the songs on this album. But the way he retells it, he just says, just watching her sit down and write, Hand in My Pocket in 60 minutes. They were in a studio apartment in the Valley in LA, I think in Encino, surrounded by instruments. And there was a lovely, nice natural sunlight coming into the space and they could create and write. But these songs just came very naturally, very freely. And they were recording these demos. And once they had a full album's worth of demos, that's where they got the record deal. And it was through Madonna's label, Maverick, that she got signed. And I mean, man, whoever dropped her before this must have been kicking themselves because it went on to sell 33 million copies. It was massive. This success of Jagged Little Pill was huge, huge success all over the world. Sensation, really, really paved the way for a lot more female singer-songwriters, powerful, stand on what they believe in, songwriters. And I believed that up until a certain point, Alanis Morissette was one of the youngest females to win the Grammy for her music at like 21. And I think it was broken by Taylor Swift, 15 years ago when she won it at 20. But that's pretty impressive. Quite a, landmark moment in music history. But back to You Oughta Know. We all know that this is the famous song. And if you were a teenager like me, it was when you were hearing her say, go down on you in a theater. We all remember that. Thinking of me while you fuck her. These lyrics that I was no stranger to kind of controversial lyrics. And again, I was already really into Tori Amos by this point in time. So I'd already experienced kind of these intense subject matters of sexuality or religion, rejection of God or masturbation or whatever these things were. I'd already kind of experienced those in Tori's music, but it still didn't take away from the power of hearing a song like You Oughta Know and hearing these lyrics come at me. You know what I mean? I was like, still really like, whoa, as a lot of us were. Because I think we might be desensitized to it now in music because people can say whatever they want. But things that were being played on MTV and the radio and having these, lyrics that were controversial, warranting censoring stickers. And of course, we still censor and there's warning labels on music now, but it's just we've been desensitized a lot because it used to be such a big deal. But we all know that this famous lyric gets attributed to Alanis Morissette dating Dave Coulier, actor, comedian. We know him as Uncle Joey on Full House. I knew him from the Nickelodeon show Out of Control. I don't know how many of you remember that show, but I watched Nickelodeon's Out of Control, and Dave Coulier was the host of that. So before Full House, I was always seeing that guy on that show. And then I was like, oh, hey, when he got Full House, I was like, hey, it's the guy from Out of Control. Out of Control was such a bonkers show, such a bonkers ass show. There was this lady on there named Diz, I think, and she would like just squeal. I don't know if any of you guys remember Out of Control. Holy shit, what a weird show. But I loved it. And I feel like even on Out of Control, Dave did the cut it out thing. I think I remember seeing that on the Nickelodeon show, and then which he brought to Full House. And then I think he's used it through comedy through the years. But he's gone on the record. He's gone on podcasts years later, and he said, like, you know, he doesn't know if for sure it's about him. He listened to the album, heard the album, and was like, oh, there's some stuff in here that sounds like it was from our relationship. It sounds like, you know, I may have hurt her in some regard, but he's like, he didn't have any recollection of one way or the other, but he knew, like, it sounds like maybe I participated in hurting her, that she would be driven to write these lyrics. And he ran into her years later and said, what do you want me to say when people ask me about this? And she was like, you say whatever you want to say. And then she, when pressed on it, has said, I'll never really say one way or the other. Nobody was in the studio with me when I was writing that song. It doesn't really have to be about anybody that anybody needs to know about. So I don't know. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day about who it's about, right? It could be an amalgamation of multiple relationships kind of tied into one, you know, kind of a faux scenario of I had this memory from this boyfriend at this time and this person at this time, and you just weave them together about standing on that ground of reminding somebody of the mess they left when they went away, you know, the lyrics, right? You ought to know. What an incredible song. But that is not, that's not the one that she's known all around the world for. I mean, that is a big song, and that was the first song. But you know, the ironic video and the ironic song, that is, I think, to this day, her most well-known, most streamed, most played song of all time. And we all remember the video of her being in the car, 4 different versions of herself singing. You know, such a great classic, iconic video. It was parodied a lot. People would do it in skits and, you know, MTV Movie Awards or whatever. They would reference that thing. And it's a great video. It's a great concept. And I just want to say right now that I think people gave Alanis Morissette too much shit over the whole irony thing. You know what I'm talking about, which is she releases this song and just all the, well, actually people came out in droves, and they still go after her to this day for this. Oh, it's not really irony. You know, everything you're singing about isn't irony. That is so annoying. I want you to know that it's one thing to observe, to be with friends and have a conversation about a song like ironic and say, you know, it's funny. A lot of the situations in that song aren't necessarily ironic. They're bad luck. But there's a ton of situational irony in the song. You get the purpose of what it's trying to say. It's not like Alanis Morissette is trying to miseducate people. It's a very catchy hook and lyric and song title and idea about things being ironic. I think in an artist license, I don't think you are held to the standard of like every single thing in this song has to be irony in the purest literary form. There is a lot of situational irony in those lyrics. Not all of them. Sure, some of them are just kind of bad luck or a shitty situation. But you get what it's about. And I think personally, she has said that it's a huge regret about putting that song on the album because she has never been able to stop people from coming up to her and saying that. It's not really irony that you're singing about. How exhausting. Alanis, from me, from the deepest part of my heart, I am sorry, because that kind of communication from human beings is just unnecessary. It's just unnecessary. When somebody does this kind of stuff to me and they actually me, I just want to be like, great, thank you. I can't wait for you to create something and put it out in the world and try something, rather than spend all your time walking around with a red pen on everybody else. Anyway, axe to grind. I'm probably a little sensitive to it because recently, on my social medias, whenever so many of you have said, like, you just can't care. Here's the thing, y'all. I'll always care. I'll always care. There's nothing that you can do that will make me just not care. I think it's hilarious to me when people have mugs, when Gen Xers have these mugs that say, like, I ran out of all the fucks to give. I don't give a fuck. Not me. Always. I always give a fuck. And it's a curse. It's a blessing. It's a blessing. Because if you've ever watched a video of mine and felt something very deep or emotional, or I seem to tap into something, that's what is what you have to be able to put up with if you can tap into that space. Does that make any sense? In order for me to access that part of me, I have to care deeply about things. And that activation point of caring a lot about things will spill over into everything else. And so sure, I could shut it off. I could really, really grit my teeth and bear down and say, that's it. I no longer will care what anybody says about me, or the actually red penner is coming to correct me. That's it. But I'm going to tell you right now, you would notice a change in who I am as a person. You would see it. You would see an absolute change. My personality would change. I would withdraw within myself. I would be less ingratiating and trusting and welcoming to others. So I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I should probably be on medication. I really should. Because it's a dangerous space to live in, to love and put your heart out here like this. It hurts. It's hard. The reward is huge because you give and people feel that gift and you're like enhancing the human experience. But it comes at a consequence of you're leaving a lot of your nerves and your feelings raw. And so you will get hurt. You will feel those stings and those zings from strangers. And I just don't know how to communicate other than that. When people say to me, they say, you just can't care. You just have to read comments and move on. I hear you. I want to go in and delete them. I want to go in and block them. I want to. And you read 999 comments that are wonderful. But it's bizarre how the one awful one will get in your brain. If you're a creator like me, or you're somebody in the public eye where a lot of people comment on what you do, then I'd imagine you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, trust me when I say it's weird. It's a weird thing. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. I will absorb the slings and arrows of others. I will absorb them because I love giving joy. I'll do it as long as I can. As long as I can. Let's get back to Jagged Little Pill, huh? Let's not take away from Alanis and her amazing album here. Let's talk a little bit about it. Okay, so we talked about You Ought to Know. The album starts out with All I Really Want. You know, great, catchy tune. I always think about the parts she's like, did you think about your bills, your ex, your deadlines? Oh, when you think I'm gonna die. I can hear her saying that in my head. One thing that was really fun about doing this episode was I put on the album and listened to it again. And I don't think I'd listened to Jagged Little Pill in a long time. Start to finish, like I said, that's the fun thing about this show is it makes me go back and experience an album start to finish. And I loved it. I was like, man, this really takes me back. I was 16 years old. It's the summer after my sophomore year. I'm driving at this time, and I'm also about to move away from my hometown. I'm about to move from Tulsa over to Illinois, and I've got a girlfriend, and it's going to be one of the hardest years of high school for me going to this new school. And this album, I remember just really getting into my feels on it. And then you get to songs like Perfect, beautiful song, incredible song. Hand in My Pocket. That might be one of my favorite lyrically songs on the album. I loved One Hand in My Pocket. I think those are really clever lyrics. Yet another single on the album. So we already have You Ought to Know video single. Then you have Hand in My Pocket, which is this black and white video. She's Parade. But it's another hit single. Then we get to Right Through You. This was a funny one because as I was listening to the album back again, and it got to the part where she goes, "You came here to wine dine 69 me." Oh boy, adolescence. You remember hearing these lyrics and being like, "Wine dine 69 me." Tee hee hee hee. But I want to get to the next one, track 6, Forgiven. This one, when I played it just the other day going through the album, I was like, oh, you know what's going to happen on this if you've been following this show. Christian kid, religious kid. Boy, this one really got me. And I remember feeling a huge amount of like guilt. But it's interesting because the song takes you on this journey. She says things in there like, my brothers never went blind for what they did, but I may as well have, and I remember thinking, oh, she's talking about masturbation and I have so much guilt over this. And the church says I'm evil and I'm going to hell. And then she has, lyrics are, in the name of the Father, the skeptic, and the Son. And I was like, oof, these are things that I was really battling with while listening to this song, Forgiven. But I'll never forget the part where she gets this part of the song and she says, but what I learned, I rejected, but I now believe again. And I remember that was the part of the song where a little young Christian boy, Jacob, was like, okay, the song's okay to listen to. You don't have to feel guilty in front of God or your parents or anybody for liking this song. Because see that lyric right there? She says, what I learned, I rejected, but I believe again. So she's basically saying like, look, I went on this doubting Thomas journey where I couldn't believe in it anymore, but I'm back and I believe, but on my own terms. I don't know what she necessarily meant by that verse right there, but it gave me this just spiritual justification for enjoying that song, Forgiven. And then we get to number 7, You Learn, another single, another hit song off this album. I mean, it kind of blows your mind when you go through and you go, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hit singles off this album. Amazing. You Learn. That's the video where she's like walking through the city. She walks through like a car accident. She's got kind of knotted hair, kind of dreads like, definitely dreaded. And she's in like a sports jumper and she makes her way through. And then there's a pie fight with her bandmates. And then she's in a boxing ring. I really like that song too. You Learn. Some of these songs really hit harder now. Even though she's like 20 while she's writing them, but you listen to these lyrics now and some of them you're like, wow, yeah. You know what I mean? They resonate. Like I've lived a lifetime since that. And you do live, you learn. Head Over Feet, another single, another great, clever lyric, use of, lyrics. I think she was a great writer. Glenn Ballard obviously helped, but she was a great writer in terms of coming up with these really clever ways of looking at things. Like I said, for Hand in My Pocket and Head Over Feet. This video was a very simple one. She kind of pulled the Sinead O'Connor. It was just a close-up on her face. That's all it was. It wasn't as emotional, tumultuous as Sinead's video, but it was just like a very close-up shot of Alanis in front of the camera, black background. Just, you can occasionally see she's like getting distracted by something in the room. It's worth mentioning, by the way, when she recorded this album, they were very specific to not overproduce it. I learned that she was not into overdubbing the vocals a bunch of times, layering in stuff. She would give a take or two on every song, and that's it. It's kind of remarkable to hear that. Incredible singer, very unique vocal style to her. You can definitely hear that Alanis Morissette vocal with those little cracks at the end, the going up, there's some elements of that in like Cranberries and whatnot, but it was very unique to Alanis's voice. Did you know that they made a musical about Jagged Little Pill in 2019? I'd love to see that. I heard it was pretty good, but I think that would be a cool experience. They made a musical production of Jagged Little Pill. I think that would be a lot of fun. Let me get to now here at the end of the album. I have a feeling that this was one of those CDs that I had where I've talked about this phenomenon before, the kind of the CD fatigue, where you've been listening to the album, and so you have your favorites or your big moments, and something interrupts you as you're getting to the end of the album, so you don't spend as much time with the songs. So I was looking at like Mary Jane, Not the Doctor, and Wake Up, those last three songs, and I remember them as I played them as I was going through. I was like, oh yeah, of course, I remember these songs very well, and they're good. They're good songs, but I don't remember spending that much time with those songs. You know what I mean? Ironic is in there. Ironic is in that run of the second side, the last half of the album. But Ironic obviously was being played everywhere. It was on MTV. It was constant rotation. It was oversaturated on terms of Ironic. But those last three, Mary Jane, Not the Doctor, and Wake Up, I'm trying in my head to think of like a standalone moment that may have struck me from those. I remember The Visiting Time is Over, then Not the Doctor. But I don't have as much of a recollection. So sorry, I don't have much to go on that. I'm sure there's somebody listening to the show right now and they're like, are you kidding me? Wake Up is the best song on Jagged Little Pill. I'm sorry. I'm sure it's wonderful. I will make sure to spend more time with it. But I don't have any interesting facts about those songs. But I do want to close out the episode with one thing, which is this album had a hidden track. Oh yeah. Loved those hidden tracks. That was a big thing to do back then, wasn't it? Include a little secret bonus track on your album where you wait, the tape cassette keeps playing, and then something starts to go. Endless Nameless, Nirvana, Green Day. How about myself? Tool. All of these amazing things that you were hidden on the albums. It was such a fun thing to have. And this album had it as well, but it was kind of doubly hidden because it says, there was the You Oughta Know alternate version that was at the end of the album. But if you stayed past that alternate version, they call it on Spotify, You Oughta Know the Jimmy the Saint blend. I don't know what that means, but I remember there being the You Oughta Know, and then you get to an a cappella piece of music, Your House. And it's a good piece of music. It kind of touches a little bit on like country. You know what I mean? I was listening to it. I've queued up Your House. I remember being really moved by it. Would you forgive me, love, if I played in your shower? Remember that? You know what I'm talking about now? She's creeping into this house of her lover, and she's laying in his bed and in the shower, and she's just having this nice moment where she's like missing him. And then it tragically ends with like finding a letter, and the letter's like, I miss you, love, meet me at midnight. And she's like, it wasn't my writing. Oh, the teenage tears that were shed. Heartbreak. She's gone in interviews and said that was kind of a fictitious. That's like the song that is a little made up. And basically, it was she was staying with this guy in LA, I think, who she had a crush on. She had a crush on him, but they weren't in a relationship together. And he was gone for a week, and she was just staying in his house. And there was a night where she slept in his bed and felt like kind of awkward, like, ooh, it's kind of weird that I'm sleeping in this guy's bed. She liked him. And she thought about like, if she were to snoop around, there would probably be something that she would find, like him having love or feelings for somebody else, and it would crush her heart a little bit. But she did not snoop. But that's where that idea occurred to her of this person being in their lover's home or missing them while they're gone, and then stumbling upon this kind of betrayal, which is just a good story. But I say country because it's like, you know, the a cappella nature is, would you forgive me, love? You kind of feel this some hurt. It feels a little like you're gonna, just little touch of country music in there. But it's a lovely little piece of hidden music. That is Jagged Little Pill. That is Jagged Little Pill, where she sings the title of the album, Jagged Little Pill, on You Learn, right? Swallow it down. Such a jagged little pill. Hard to swallow, a jagged little pill. I love Alanis Morissette. I bought this album. I bought the one after it. And then I didn't keep up with her as much. I was trying to spend some time going through her latest releases, and whatever she put out in 2022 was kind of ambient sounding in the first 3 songs I was listening to. I was like, this is cool. But I believe she's touring. I'd love to see her. Alanis, if you hear this, I want to hang out. Let's hang out. I mean, we're close in age, for God's sakes. But I remember seeing in the movie Dogma, you know, where she plays God at the end and doing her little somersaults. What a cutie. I'd love to meet Alanis Morissette. I think she'd be a good hang. I think she'd be a good person to sit down and have like a philosophical conversation with about life and existence. But this was a good one. What an album. Jagged Little Pill. 1995. And then this is, you know, after this we get into the follow-up album, and then music is shifting a lot. And so I think, unfortunately, she fell in the wake of that. But this album runs 13 songs, 57 minutes, 25 seconds. Just a solid hour of getting your feels. You can be angry. You can be in love. You can feel slighted. You can feel sad. All of it really represents such a specific time in the 90s. Anyway, if you've never spent much time with Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill, you should. It's a great album. But this has been another episode of Waterproof Records. I loved doing this one. I feel like there was something coming into it that I was like, oh, don't forget to talk about that. But I think it was the Forgiven, the religious kid stuff, because that really struck me when I was re-listening to this album. Thank you again for helping me make this show possible. I can't do it without you. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're sending this. I know you have somebody in your life who is like a big Alanis Morissette fan, and you could send this episode to them and they could correct me on everything. They could come after me and just completely actually me and tell me all the things that I got wrong, because that will always happen. But like I said, bring it on, because you are not going to dampen this flame no matter how much I bitch and moan about it. If you see me complaining in my comments about it, I'm just doing it because it's my only way that I can keep it going. But I love you, because you listen to Waterproof Records, so clearly you're on board for whatever I'm doing. Okay, so thank you. I appreciate you. Make sure you check out distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. Get that 30% off your first year of uploads. Get that music out there that you're working on. And again, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell them about this show. I got to grow. I got to grow. And exciting episodes coming up. My buddy Jarrett, who was on one of the early shows, he said, you know, you should close out episodes by telling something you're listening to that you're liking. And I thought that was a great suggestion. So I might actually make it, if I could ever get this show like edited where I have segments or something, but maybe a segment at the end of every show where I talk about an album that I'm enjoying that's a new release. This one, I have to drop this album on this episode because it's the perfect band name for having a badass like Alanis Morissette. This band, Mannequin Pussy. Yes, that is the name of the band. Sorry if there's anybody in the car who's offended by that. They released an album called I Got Heaven, and I love it. I think it's great. It goes all over the place. It has the rock, it has the punk, it has the more pop and indie sound to it, but I just really love the sound of this album so far. It's already landed itself into my keep an eye on this for top of 2024. So if you listen to the show, what I'm going to be doing is trying to talk about from each episode an album that I'm digging, okay? So maybe we'll call it like Jacob's new releases, or I probably could come up with a better title than that, though. I promise I will. So anyway, offensive band name right now, or not offensive? It's not offensive. It's not offensive. It's just a word, but I'm just warning you. Mannequin Pussy. And the album is called I Got Heaven. It's awesome. Rock. So that's it. That concludes it. I've carried this on too long. It's time for me to get out of here. It's time for you to get out of here and have a wonderful day. So thanks for joining me once again on Waterproof Records. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna